Just over 80 years ago this week, hundreds of thousands of men hit the beaches of Normandy and began the end of World War II. Monuments and memorials help us remember those who put their lives on the line for freedom. Hi, I'm Peyton Luke, and you are watching First Liberty Live. First of all, thank you for liking and sharing our content. It really makes such a big difference in the work that we do to defend religious liberty across America. Joining us today is General Jerry Boykin, who is Executive Vice President at Family Research Council, and First Liberty's Senior Counsel, Roger Byron. Hi, General. Hi, Roger.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you both for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Well, it's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
So, General Boykin, this week is when we commemorate the sacrifices of the men who stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day in 1944. So, help us understand the significance of that day in history and what they accomplished that day.
Yeah, that is a very special day for me. And Normandy is a very special place for me, too, because my dad was wounded there. He was part of the group that came ashore. And I always looked up to him as I realized he lost his eye storming the beaches there. So it's a really important day for me. And I think for any American, you need to walk the beaches of Normandy and you will feel something that you can't imagine if you put yourself in the place of the people that were coming ashore that day, as I do with my dad. It's a very special place. It was the turning point in the war, and it basically was, I think, what we could say was the beginning of the end for the Germans. And had they prevailed there, who knows what the world would be like today, because it certainly wouldn't be what it is.
So you were an original member of the Army's Delta Force, and ultimately you commanded the Army's Green Berets as well as the Special Warfare Center and School. So that gives you such an interesting and powerful perspective on these situations. So what do memorials mean to those who have served in the military?
Well, they mean a great deal, and I don't think it's just for those in the military. I think Americans that are patriotic recognize and understand what these memorials are about and how much they do to preserve our history. And there's an old Russian proverb that says, if you dwell in the past, you lose an eye. If you forget about the past, you lose both eyes. And that's what we've done. We've lost both eyes because we have done very stupid things, like taking down these memorials that preserve our history and help us to remember the sacrifices that have been made.
And following up on that, what is your favorite Veterans Memorial, and why does that one mean so much to you?
Well, I'm going to surprise you a little bit here because I spent 36 years in the Army, but my favorite memorial is the Marine Corps Memorial. And I've studied that battle, and it is just such an incredible part of our history, particularly our military history, and the sacrifice there. I mean, that thing went on for like 3 months, 89 days. That fight went on, and ultimately the Marines prevailed. But I think that when you look at the flag that they're raising there, and you stop and think of the price that was paid to be able to raise that flag there, it almost brings tears to my eyes, and I go to that every time I have an opportunity.
I think you bring up such an important point that it just reminds us the sacrifices that were made by those brave men and women during that time and up to today. And thank you also for sharing your story about your father on D-Day. I didn't know that story, and that must make it so personal and powerful for you and your family.
It does indeed, and he's been gone for quite a number of years, but I got to tell you, his legacy lives on because he loved America, and he was only 17 years old when he came in the Navy, and so I think that that's important, that we preserve our history, and one of the ways that we can do that is by and through these memorials. And for us to take them down for these silly reasons is absolutely unbearable in my mind, because we should be doing everything we can to recognize these sacrifices and to recognize the people, men and women, that have given all. And that includes those that started in the Revolutionary War and those that have fought in the wars that we're going through right now.
Yeah, so many of them gave the ultimate sacrifice of their lives just so we could have these beautiful freedoms we enjoy today. And I think that's incredible. With these memorials, help us remember that. So thank you for sharing. And Roger, I would love to bring you in now. You're a Navy veteran who then went into law. So make the connection for us between First Liberty's Supreme Court victories and memorials that contain religious imagery.
Well, it was a little more than 10 years ago now that we were retained by the American Legion to defend a World War I memorial that the Legion had erected almost 100 years ago. We were a little outside Washington, D.C., in Bladensburg, Maryland. It was known as the Peace Cross. It was an enormous, over 30-foot tall, cross-shaped World War I memorial, like so many from that war are cross-shaped. The cross became international, a symbol of the fallen war. And we were privileged to be retained by the Legion, along with our network attorneys at the law firm Jones Day, come to the defense of this wonderful memorial that is still standing, by the way. We began litigating that in 2014. 5 years later, we finally got to the Supreme Court and secured what I consider our first really big Supreme Court victory. Up until that point, the law was really on the wrong side of things for memorials, even veterans memorials, that had religious images or text, and most of them had lost, would have been litigation. However, with our case, which is called the American Legion, appropriately enough, we ended all of that. And the law changed that day in 2019 so that long-standing memorials and practices and symbols that happened to have or use religious symbols or imagery or text were presumed to be lawful. So we completely flipped the table on what the law had been. And then just 3 years later, we really changed things.
Well, we appreciate all your work on that. It's an incredible story. In fact, I have a picture of the Bladensburg Peace Cross behind me here on set, and you're right. It's just such a beautiful, amazing cross to help us remember that. And I know you're traveling to Maryland this summer for the 100th anniversary of the Bladensburg Peace Cross. So it has to hit you at a heart level when you realize you played a significant role in seeing that cross continue to stand.
It was a real honor and privilege to be on that legal team. A lot of really great attorneys went into that victory. None of them more so than Chris DePompio at Jones Day. A lot of attorneys at First Liberty Institute, and a lot of attorneys at our other firms. But I counted as one of probably the primary privileges of my life to date, is to be part of that effort that ended in such outstanding victory and an increase and a fix of the law, both for that memorial and not just that one, but for all our veterans memorials, coast to coast.
What do you say to people that disagree with the religious imagery on memorials and they don't want to see these up in public places, or they think they don't belong in public places?
Certainly the standard now, and it should have always been the standard for anything on public property that happens to use religious images or text or symbols, is whether it accords with history and tradition. In building upon our victory in the American Legion matter just 3 years later, in 2022, we completely ended the 50-year reign of a very destructive legal doctrine known as the lemon test. The Supreme Court formally abandoned that in our victory in Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, and formally made history and tradition, as understood by our founding fathers, the standard for what is or is not in keeping with the Constitution when it comes to church and state matters.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that, because I know lots of people don't realize the changes that have come about in recent years and based on Kennedy. But history and tradition, it's such an important precedent, especially when it comes to protecting these amazing memorials.
It is a good standard. The standard that had been there for 50 years, known as the lemon test, was a very subjective, malleable standard that an activist court could use to effectively reach whatever decision it wanted to reach. With the history and tradition standard, we've now added a significant amount of objectivity to the analysis, which will help keep courts on track and ensure that our nation's history and tradition and the best of what we've done will be preserved and can no longer be attacked gratuitously in the courts.
That's great. We so appreciate your work on that. Such an important precedent. So General Boykin, turning back to you, we have a lot of prayer warriors who support First Liberty. So how can we pray for our veterans, and what are ways we can best show them honor and respect?
Well, I think that you can pray for a number of things for the veterans. One is that that they will be freed of the things that follow them home when they come home. You know, it's you got a lot of PTSD, and you've seen what happens when people come back from war and just can't cope, can't integrate back into their family or their society. We need to be praying for them that the spouses will be able to stand strong and influence the person that they're married to, whether they're a man or a woman, and help them through the difficult times when they get back. Now, there are lots of things you could pray for them about, but in my view, right now in America, that's the one that we need to put the majority of our prayer time into, is helping them to get through what they have experienced and be able to be what the spouses remember them as. And I would say to you, we also need to pray for their long-term health. It's still about 22 a day that are killing themselves and suicide. And that's just an awful thing. They survive the rigors of combat and come home and take their own lives. And that's and we just haven't broken the code on that yet. But I believe that what you're talking about, prayer, I believe we could turn the tide if we could get enough people to rattle the gates of heaven with a sincere prayer that God will deliver these people from what they've experienced and bring peace into their souls. I think it will do a great deal to bring about a change in what's happening.
Yeah, so many of them have experienced the unimaginable on our behalf, so we could have these freedoms. And the least we can do is pray for them as they get back into everyday life and civilian life and society. So thank you for that encouragement. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before I let you go today?
No, what I will say is, you guys have been champions. I mean, I don't know how to say it other than you have been champions on this issue and many others involving our military. And one of the issues that has really been something that just cannot come to grips with is when these organizations are supposed to be taking care of veterans. Some of them are government organizations and some of them are not, but they go to the missing man table and they take the Bible away. Now I would like for you to look into that, and I'd like for you to do something about it, because you have done miracles as far as I'm concerned. And that, if there is a sacred memorial, that's it. That missing man table, that's in honor of not just the veterans, but that's in honor of the people that didn't come home.
General, the good news is we have done something about that exact issue. Just in recent years, we had the privilege to represent the Northeast POW MIA organization in New England. And they had an issue where there was a missing man table on display at one of the VA facilities there that used the Bible from a, frankly, World War II hero who served a number of years in a Nazi prison camp. And his Bible was included as part of that display. Some issues the VA received a complaint from one of the usual suspects. And this organization retained us. We worked for quite a while on that matter, and I can tell you today that Bible is now back on that display. It's going to remain.
Well, God bless you. God bless all of you guys at First Liberty, guys and girls. Just keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing well. And as far as I'm concerned, you're the go-to people on all of these kinds of issues.
Well, we are so grateful for our attorneys and our legal team. They truly are incredible. And our marketing team, our communications team, to get the word out and share these powerful stories. So thank you, General Boykin and Roger. We both really appreciate your time today. If you'd like to see America's religious heritage defended, you can make that happen by supporting First Liberty Institute. You can go to our website's homepage and you'll see the big red Give button. First Liberty is fighting for faith and delivering freedom.